Hey, business owners, great news for you all. The Buy, Grow, Sell Summit is back for 2023. This is the online event for business owners looking to acquire, scale, or exit a business. Now, mark your calendars. This event's going to be on the 5th and 6th of September. As I said, it is fully online and it's going to run from sort of early morning to sort of around the middle of the day. And it's going to be packed with some amazing speakers like Mark Boris AM, who is renowned for his time not only as the founder of Wizard Home Loans, but he was also on Channel 9 as the leader of The Apprentice and Celebrity Apprentice. He also went on to do the show Mentored via Channel 7. Janine Alice from Shark Tank and Boost Juice, and a bunch of other speakers who are going to blow your socks off with the amount of tips and practical advice that you can walk away with and implement immediately in your business. This really is a summit not to miss. It's free to register, it's free to attend, and I guarantee you're going to take a lot of value away. Now head over to buygrowsellsummit.com, drop in your name and email address to register and confirm your spot. Of course, we'll let you know all the details and how to log in, but buygrowsellsummit.com is the website. We look forward to joining you at the summit. Radek, welcome to the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, my pleasure, mate. I know we've tic-tacked on and off trying to get you on the show for a while now, so I'm glad we could finally get together and really looking forward to unpacking your story.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mate, why don't we, obviously I've got the benefit of having a look at your background and whatever and knowing we're going to chat a little bit today about the Swisse Wellness Group and other businesses you're involved in, but maybe you could kick off for me and just give a little bit of your background for the audience. Who are you? What got you into business? And, I guess really what led you to being involved in the Swisse Wellness Group?
Sure. Yeah. So who I am, I'm an Aussie mongrel. Dad's Australian with Albanian background. Mum's Czech, and I was born in Scotland. So I've ended up with a name that people have to clarify every time I order coffee, which is a beautiful thing. And my middle name's Rudolph too, so that always put a smile on people's face.
That would have been fun in the playground as a kid.
Oh, you nailed it. The first roll call of every year is they nail the kind of everyone's middle name to make sure they got the right person was always just So anyway, we're bigger person for that. And so for me, my father, he's a professor of surgery and he's still practicing full-time, working harder than I've ever worked to this day, and in his 80s and loving it. But he was back in the 70s talking about diet causing disease. And a lot of his peers would laugh at that thought, and it took 20 years for his research to be published in the British Medical Journal and so forth. And my mother's a medical scientist. So we grew up in an environment where there was a pandemic every day. It would talk about health and the importance of health, and Dad, being a professor, would lecture on it all the time. So I was, and I hear about his frustrations. And I kind of thought that I'd never want to be a scientist or a doctor because it sounds all pretty frustrating. But I reckon I could break this business system thing and kind of learn from a place like Village Roadshow, which I did, which was fantastic. It was in movies and I worked in the candy bar there and and worked my way up through every role, basically through cinema operations. And also learned to manage a lot of my friends and peers and people that were older than me and do that in a way that, was friendly. You had to be the same person outside of work and as inside of work. So that were good business principles, and I call that kind of my, the university I got paid to do. And then I progressed on and always had a passion for health. It did rub off on me a bit, all of those lectures. So it felt like it was the right time to move out of cinemas after 10 years of working in a big company where there aren't too many organisations that that are of that size that own the brand IP in this country. It's always a subsidiary of another business or something like that. Carlton United Breweries is another one, but of size and scale that's gone global, and so it was a wonderful learning ground and prepared me for Swisse, which did become a global business over time.
Yeah, nice. I always find it really interesting the differences in approaches between service-based products, or service-based businesses versus product-based businesses and the different mindsets. I mean, I think coming out of Roadshow, do you think some of that, understanding that business model and how to deliver a service, are they skills that were transferable, did you find?
Yeah, interestingly, I founded 3 service businesses, exited one, and I've had a number of product businesses that, obviously Swisse was a product business, but came from a service background at Village. So look, there's some interfaces, and for me, the kind of constant is treating everyone equal, which has now become a kind of a conscious business philosophy that, your suppliers are as important as your customers, and it's not just about profits, it's about the people that work with you as well. And so you have to know that in a service business, and it seems quite strange when you think about a product business and just being profit focused coming from that service background. But a lot of businesses are still transitioning from that phase to that. So I think it held me in really good stead to have that kind of fundamental focus on service first, and then the rest following.
Yeah, that's cool. So when did you start? Like, what year was it that you started with the Swisse Wellness Group, and how did you get involved with that company?
So it's 2005, and after being at a Village for 10 years, it felt like the right time to move out of cinemas. We were starting to close cinemas. DVDs were becoming to be a threat, and home cinema was coming to bear. Gee, they've got a lot more to face at the moment. But the business trucked on, and Gold Class was a big success. But it also had a young CEO who had done really well, but the growth kind of found him out, and he would have been 30. And so they weren't going to go for another young CEO in that organisation. So it became clear to me at the ripe old age of 26, I needed to start looking outside of Village. So by 27, the right opportunity come forward. It was Swisse. They did approach me a couple of times before that with other roles at other times of their growth. But the business probably wasn't large enough for what I was looking for. And I probably wasn't ready to make the transition then. And so, as the universe does, it delivered at the right time. And Swisse was doing about 12 million in revenue, had about 30 odd people. So it was akin to a medium-sized cinema. And I was running a number of cinemas by then. And so it felt like a really good transition to kind of slot in. And there's this opportunity to grow into being CEO. So I started as an operations manager, quickly became general manager, and then soon after that, CEO.
Yeah, nice. How much do you think experience plays? Like you mentioned that, it was like a medium-sized cinema and you'd run multiple cinemas. How much does that kind of experience, as in you've played at a certain level with a certain sort of amount of numbers and all the rest of it, how important is that type of experience, do you think, for people stepping into either their own business or a new venture?
Yeah, I think it was really important for Swisse to have someone that had the insight as to how to grow a business, because the shareholders and the management had kind of got it to a point, and that, for me, that first 10 million is the hardest 10 million to create, and they'd done that hard work, and they created this wonderful culture philosophy that I kind of grew with and kind of extrapolated on, and became a kind of super powerful why we were successful at Swisse. But going back to, the requirement of the business, for it to grow, it needed to get out of that founder mentality where the founder had to be there for every decision. And we had a big group of implementers, but no one was really remit for, an ability to make decisions around this kind of core grouping of, if it's, X amount of spend, you can make that decision up to there. And these are the things you need to think about that are rolling out a strategy and doing more of it and getting better on it. So we needed to transition beyond that for the organisation to grow. And because, as I was saying, it was the size of a medium-sized cinema, and I was running, I think, about 16 different complexes at that stage, you kind of get used to relying on a management structure with good system and process, and them having KPIs that report back on. And then if there's a variation to that, then you dive into that and you find out what's going wrong. And that's foreign to a lot of founder-led businesses.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that structure and levels of authorities and delegations and all that stuff becomes just more and more important, right? As you start to grow, and you can't be across everything, right?
It's the fundamentals. It's the language of business, and it's the reason why businesses, go beyond a certain growth point. Is that that's why businesses get big, because they do roll out a system that's repeatable, and it becomes like a flywheel that gets bigger and larger in its influence as you get better and better at doing it.
Yeah, for sure. Just for those who aren't familiar with Swisse Wellness Group, what sort of broadly did they actually offer? What products and services?
Well, we had a men's and women's multivitamin at the time I joined, and we had a number of other products that were in a similar space but under different brands, and that was done to kind of hedge the reliance on one brand. But over time, I quickly saw that it was probably inefficient. And we needed to invest in our core business and be really good at that, and that was the multivitamin. And then that business, we had these other brands that were selling supplements, but for specific conditions rather than an all-round solution. And so we slowly brought them in under the Swisse brand, and that made us more effective, more efficient, and got a much better return for our marketing spend.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost an analogy just for business itself. Are you a business that does a kind of general multivitamin, or do you niche down and try to solve specific problems? I mean, do you have a view on that sort of thing, and what is typically a better approach for businesses to think about?
Well, I can tell you, it took us years of strategic conversation to get to that point, that it was the right call to do that. And I think the thing we did best was unpack failure and kind of understand why things didn't go as well as we'd planned, and that would quickly reinforce that we needed to just strengthen our core and be better at that, but also have real recognition around the strength of the multivitamin, and making sure that people, that if they chose our multivitamin, they wouldn't then buy the product, say, for a joint condition, and then replace the multivitamin. They would be adding on the sale. So we had our multivitamins were called Ultivite, and then we called all of the new products that came in for specific conditions like sleep or joint or kind of anti-anxiety. They were Ulti-Boost. So you needed your multivitamin, and then you would boost it to service a chronic condition that you might be facing, or something you'd like to deal with as a challenge that you're dealing with every day. So,
yeah, that's quite clever. Quite clever. It's one of the things I see a lot of smaller businesses, a lesson a lot of small businesses could learn. Introducing new products and services. How do you tie it back to your core, the brand that people have bought into originally? How do you align it? People look for familiarity, right, when they're purchasing, and fundamentally, know, like, trust relates to products as well.
You've got to have an authentic story that you can tell on the connection, and then that can become your real point of difference for who you're competing with as well.
Yeah, interesting. So you started there in 2005. How long were you with the group until it ultimately sold?
So we sold the business. Well, the last tranche of sale happened in 2016. The first tranche 2015. Okay. That was 16 months afterwards that we got the last tranche done, and the last tranche was done for a valuation that was about 30% higher than the first one. So we did
nice.
There was good momentum in the business, and that looked after everything. The actual put wasn't set to happen for 3 years, but we managed to convince the people that had bought us that they wouldn't be able to afford us in 3 years if they waited that long. So it was a good result.
So give us a sense of the journey then. You started in 2005. It was doing about 12 million in revenue. What did it look like by the time you started having exit discussions?
Look, the exit discussions happened 5 years before that started, so it was a long process to get us there. And many times, we thought we'd got to, climbing Everest, and we're going to get a deal done, and it would, things would change and momentum would shift, and all of a sudden you're at the start of running a process again and trying to undo all of the thoughts and dreams that you're starting to have around how you're going to spend that money or what you're going to do with your next life. So, so it wasn't a short process.
So I'm going to pause you there because, God, this is such an important lesson for business owners out there who are thinking of that selling is part of their exit strategy. That one, deals always take longer than you think they will take. This is absolutely inevitable. I always say to our clients, allow in your mind 12 months. I've deals that I've done, they've gone a little bit quicker. Some of them have gone longer, but if you're not ready for at least a 12-month journey, then you probably will find yourself getting pretty frustrated. But another sort of little lesson, which I'm taking out of your words here, but I was in the US recently at a range of conferences for M&A work and talking to so many different other advisors and friends, and this common theme just kept coming out is that you lose a deal 3 times before you get it done.
Yeah.
So almost 3 times you go, okay, this deal's probably dead now, but you managed to salvage it and something else happens and it twists and it turns, and it can be a long and rigorous sort of journey.
It definitely tests friendships, partnerships, everyone's resolve as a team, and you really need to think about strategically all of those outcomes and have the right support services around you to make sure your business is guided through without it affecting your core business.
Yeah, totally. Can you tell us a little bit about what did your sort of deal team look like, both from an internal kind of employee perspective as well as external advisors?
Well, it kind of changed many times as we went through. And so the first incarnation was us just meeting with people and thinking we can just get this done ourselves. And that quickly became clear that we couldn't do that. We appointed a banker, and I suppose how I think about it is if you're trying to sell your house without a real estate agent. I've sold an apartment doing that, and that was pretty simple because someone bought an apartment below me, and I could offer exactly the same footprint for the same price, and they had a couple underbidders, and that quickly got done without an agent. But there was an agent working for that person below, and so they had the relationship there to close the sale. So that's as close as I've come to selling something without an agent of size and of meaningful capital gain for me. So this one here, we kicked around a little bit where we met with people, and then it quickly became clear, hang on, we need the profession of someone servicing us and doing this properly. And when you talk to any person that's been through an exit, they just say that the most important person is your advisor or banker that's acting on your behalf, who you've got around you to get you through. And you won't realise this until you're through the process of how valuable that service is. And so, we ran a process, and we went with probably the more affordable option. We had some relationships with that organisation, and they were okay. They weren't great, but they were okay. They organised some debt for us because we became quickly clear we weren't going to get a sale. I was pretty focused on making sure that we got the same value as what Blackmores were valued at the time, which was probably, our growth was projecting to hitting their numbers, but we hadn't achieved them, and they were a publicly listed organisation as well. So I was naming the price, which is, again, something you shouldn't do. Let the market tell you what your business is worth, and then start working it back from there. And so that we went all through that, and there was a couple of years of fumbling around, and the business kind of it went through growth pains, and we struggled with profitability. So we needed to look inwardly and make sure we got profitability back. Thankfully, growth maintained, and we quickly became the number one player. And then we ran a bit of a process around refinancing that debt, and it was with the current banker that we were working with and another banker. And the other banker just were very hungry to get the deal done and worked a whole lot harder than the one that we'd had working with us, and they're probably tired of working with us, to be honest. That lost interest as well, but they were there, and importantly there, because we needed to keep the other group honest with competitive tension, and to the point where the banker that had got been with us for a while got pretty tired with me, and they said that they'll provide the debt if Radek doesn't isn't CEO going forward.
Okay.
I had to say to my business partner and majority shareholder that you need to tell these guys that that's okay, you're all right with that, because we needed to be able to tell the other banker that we have a deal and we need you to improve it. And we didn't tell them about the part that I was gone on that new deal. And thankfully they did, and they were really excited by me and my team's leadership and supported us all the way through.
It's a really interesting perspective. I appreciate you sharing that. It's once again, a couple of takeaways out of that is this concept of deal fatigue, right? And deal fatigue is not just tired of the process. Sometimes it's you've been working with other people, and whether it's an external banker or it's sometimes it's the other party or wherever it is, like you can just get frustrated dealing with people in a scenario that just is maybe not moving as quickly as what everyone wants. So I think that's one big takeaway is understanding deal fatigue and how it impacts you. One thing I would like to ask, though, which I think is going to be super relevant to people listening, is this question of who do we involve in our internal team? You know, like who are we going to include in this process? Because I think everyone's worried about confidentiality and things getting out, and will staff leave or will customers leave and all that sort of stuff. So it's probably one of the big topics I find people asking me a lot of questions about. So what sort of approach did you guys take?
We set up a deal team, and so that team were incentivized to get a deal done. It was 3 or 4 people in our business, and that was they were the only people that knew about the deal. They were the only people working on the deal, and that really worked really well for us. It was an important thing, and because our core business was growing so rapidly, we needed all hands on deck. And yes, they weren't just on the deal, but they were the ones that were ring fenced and were aware of the process and were hands on. And the other thing we did too was down the path was really set up all of our reporting. So it was, we'd always talk about being a VIPO standard for that. As soon as we started that sell process, we wanted to make sure that all our reporting, all of our books, all of everything we did was of an IPO standard. And we didn't need to be doing that, but we just knew that it would hold us in the best of stead for any diligence, any structure, and also making sure that it was really relevant to operating the business and it was used. So all reporting was alive and kind of brought to life, and the narrative around actions and outcomes and board presentations on certain areas of the business all were really relevant and kept in a data room that we were building over a long period of time.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. As the CEO, how did you find that sort of tension in terms of the pressure on your own bandwidth from focusing on the deal? And obviously, as you said, the longer the deal, the more it sort of tends to drain from you. But how did you find the pressure with managing the deal, but also having to manage the ongoing business and keeping the numbers moving in the right direction? And worst thing I've always seen in a deal is that we get halfway through and the numbers tank, the sales or whatever it is. So how did you find sort of having to juggle those two priorities?
We went through all of that, numbers tanking and things changing and momentum shifting and then, me being pulled from pillar to post. I think that's where you land on having a deal team, on having the right bankers around you who believe in the path forward. So they've taken the time to get the messages of your business and can fundamentally speak as well about the business as you do. At the time when you're getting asked all these questions, you go, why are they asking me all these questions? They were actually really good questions because they're educating themselves on your business so they can talk as advocates for your business and help you sell your business. So that time was time well spent, and that change of banking support really made a big difference for us. It just felt like I had a whole lot less pressure. They were like, get on with running the business. We will ask you for updating of reporting. We've got our deal team. And yes, we'll utilize you when we need to talk to clients and so forth, but we'll do a lot of the small talk or warming up that's required. And we also know your business pretty intimately. That we invited a representative from the group onto our board, and we treated them like a board member, even though they're just an observer. But we wanted them to be up to date with our business, to know it intimately. So, they could do a lot of that work for us in the area they know well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting approach. It's, that sort of embedding into the business to get that sort of real feel for it. It's, I think there's nothing like being able to, in your words, be able to speak of the business as if it's their own, and I think, with that comes a sort of level of passion and pride about it too, right? It's, I think that would no doubt shine through to the buyers. So, yeah, it's really interesting. So you came in as an employee. So did you end up? Did you have shares in the company by the time it exited?
Yeah, so I slowly bought shares over a 10-year period, and yeah, I ended up with close to 15% of the business. I had about $15 odd million worth of debt. And at one stage, a couple of years before we did the deal, about 9 months before we did the deal, I should say, we had a valuation done on the business. It was $100 million. And we had 70 mil debt, and 30 mil would have come out. And so for my 15%, I would have been well underwater. Our other shareholders had no debt against their shares. It was quite tempting for them. But we managed to push one more push forward and got an extraordinary result. So,
yeah, that's awesome. So, but what did the business ultimately sell for?
The first tranche was 1.67 billion, and the second tranche was 2.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, who were the buyers?
They were a group called Buyers Time. They're now called H&H Group, which was our goal of making people healthier and happier. Or,
yep.
We used to have a day called H&H Day, or Health and Happiness Day, that people would earn an extra day off each month. So they really liked H&H, and so now they're called H&H Group. We were actually quite significantly bigger than them by the time the transaction happened. So they're listed in the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. And they were in infant formula, and they made premium infant formula out of Europe, and they'd import it back into China. So they're the biggest Chinese-owned infant formula business. And yeah, they actually were a perfect partner. We'd met them 5 years before that, and started talking to them about doing a partnership deal in China. And it would have been a whole lot cheaper for them if they'd accepted that deal then. And they said it just wasn't, the timing wasn't right. And we went over to the US, and that's where we spent that $70 million worth of debt that we generated, and learned a lot of lessons about what not to do in international growth. But that's paid us and, sowed some amazing seeds in kind of reinforcing us as a global brand, because we used global properties like Ellen DeGeneres and Nicole Kidman, the Australian Olympic team, to launch into the US, but also then to hedge our risk in Australia with that audience that would resonate there. And then Nicole Kidman at the same time, she was the face of Omega and Chanel, and already very big in Asia. And so that started to get us some massive knock on in China. And then China came back on the agenda as we became the biggest health brand in China.
Yeah, amazing. A couple of things I'd love to pick on just there is that, which certainly interests me. The first being that they were smaller than you by the time they acquired you, and so I find that interesting. It's usually not the case, but it certainly can have a big knock-on effect to culture and all sorts of things like that. And speaking to culture, I think the second part, my second question is selling to an overseas entity. I find can be amazing, but it adds complexity. And in addition to that, selling to a listed company, because there's different reporting requirements and compliance and all that sort of stuff. So do you feel that obviously it sounds like you had a good relationship with this buyer, but did any of those elements add complexity to your deal?
100%. I mean, it is very difficult to trade in China as the number one player without a local partner. So for us, there was kind of no other way to go about it other than getting some kind of partnership going. And so that was really important. The other part of it was we ran an extensive process. We went globally. We went to Europe, US, China, throughout Asia to talk to various organisations. And so that was good for us to go through and just get a feel for who we could partner with, and it made us feel really good about the entrepreneurial Chinese partner that we we were pretty focused on, and already had a relationship with. And they'd won Best Employer in China a number of times. And so we, in 2015, when we sold the business, won Best Employer, and we won it again in 2016. And so for us, culture was important. For them, culture was important. Yes, our version of culture compared to a Chinese company's version of culture is different, but the same notion, the hearts were in the same place. So that made us, feel a whole lot more comfortable about partnering with a group that put culture up as an important aspiration. And so you try and find like synergies that aren't just financial. You try and find like goals, and hence, they took on H&H as their company name, and they really liked our values and how they resonated and worked with our team, and they were used to make decisions in our everyday, conversations or meetings that we would have. And, culture became a way of kind of making ourselves feel comfortable about not being in the room when the decisions were being made. So it's just as important a KPI is how we're going against culture as how we're going against our business plan from our point of view.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So what was your journey after the deal was done? Where did what was your transition like? When did you phase out? And how did you feel about that part of the process?
Yeah, so 2015, we start with the new partner, and I was pretty spent by then. I was like, after we did the deal, I went home and I didn't celebrate. I just said, well, this is our way of celebrating. I just said to my beautiful wife, Helen, she said, what do you want to do tonight? I said, can you just make your chicken soup? And we opened a bottle of Grange, so that was pretty wild. And sort of went, whoa, that was just pretty major. And so I felt like I needed to reset myself. I was all of a sudden a director of a public company and representing a portion of the business that's now the biggest part of that publicly listed business. And so I had no doubt that things weren't going to slow down. and so really I tried to make it work initially and tried to kind of think about whether it was for me, but it quickly became clear that the business had outgrown me, and I kind of knew that going into the sale. That's what I'd come to terms with it probably the last year or two, that I was on a plane three weeks of every 4 in a month. And so it wasn't a sustainable lifestyle for me. And the business required that of its CEO. So it was pretty easy for me to see very clearly that the 30% I had left in the business, I needed to just focus on getting that out whilst I had some level of control as the CEO of the business and managing that in a way that was, fair for all parties. And we got a result and that's how I formed a really close relationship with our banker, Adam Gregory, from Goldman Sachs, and we just found ourselves really aligned on a number of issues and seen the whites of each other's eyes through the thick and thin as the deal progressed over a number of years, and we just felt like that there was just a similar value structure that we could build an exciting business or investment group around. And so, Adam and I partnered up to create Light Warrior, which is what my wife said to me when she first fell in love with me. She said, "You're my Light Warrior." I thought that was pretty cool, so we kept it and we named our investment group that. We invest in businesses that aim, have purpose and are conscious in the way they go about doing business.
Yeah, nice. I'd love to jump into Light Warrior in a little bit as well, but I have one little kind of final half observation, half question. But I love that you came home and asked for chicken soup. It's one thing, for those listening, it seems to be a common experience for a lot of people out there that when they finally get through their deal, they often just feel so damn exhausted they don't even feel like celebrating. It's just like, I'm just so glad it's over. And to me, the chicken soup is like the medicine for the soul, right? Like it's just, I just need a little bit of love and a bit of, something calm and not too over the top. And so I totally appreciate that. Out of interest, did you in the end, did you get some kind of a trophy reward? Did you buy something to acknowledge the deal? Was there something like that for you?
Yeah, I did. My father, he bought a Ferrari 4-seater when I was born, and so he got it from the factory in Italy, and he was living in Europe at the time, and so I'd always dreamed that when I could afford it, that's what I would do. So, that's what I did. I went and bought a Ferrari that would fit a 6'4" person, which is a 4-seater as well.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, congratulations. Obviously, a very, very long journey and well deserved reward in the end. So, yeah, congrats. So tell us quickly. I mean, we've got a few minutes here, but I'm keen to understand a bit more about Light Warrior and what are the sort of companies you guys invest in?
Yeah, so we used to do a whole lot of investments, and so we're down to about 7 or 8 now, but we had over 10, 15 at one stage, and and so that was when we, I was kind of worried about the transition from working as hard as I was to slowing down, and I just felt like that idle hands wouldn't be the best thing for me after what I'd gone through. So we did a lot of investment. We were on a lot of boards. I think I was on 14 at one stage, which is just crazy.
Goodness.
And we owned like 10 to 15, maximum 20% of a business, and we just found ourselves working as hard as someone that was owning 50%. Or anyone else around the table as investors. Obviously we had a management team in each of those businesses, but we'd be supporting them really heavily with support services and our IP and so forth. And we just went, this is just, this just doesn't feel right. And we feel pretty fried because you're going in from one set of business issues and people stuff that's going on to going, okay, got that onto the next one. Yeah, the nuts and bolts of businesses can be pretty similar between them, but there's a whole story and narrative that goes with each, business and why and where it's at. And so it's just exhausting going from one thing to the next. And so, it just became really clear that we needed to invest owning over 50% of a business going forward. And if we were to invest in, something smaller than that, it would be a strategic partnership where they were either supply chain or customer facing, and optimizing the majority led businesses that we were in. And so we've simplified that to just wellness and funds management. And so our wellness play is Wonderlust, which is a all plant-based herbals business, which is pre-COVID was the largest yoga festival in the world, over 50 shows. We're starting to rebuild that, and I see that as the marketing activation where we sell tickets for those events and brings to life a deeper connection with our customer and what our products do, and more authentically connect beyond the kind of the celebrity model that Swisse was so successful in doing. So that's that one. And I needed to make sure I wasn't going back to retailers with something that was just Swisse 2.0. This is something completely new and, in fact, doesn't directly compete with Swisse. So that's that. And then we've got our funds management business, which is conscious investment management. So I think we're the largest impact fund in the country, which has over 300 million in management with a really strong trajectory of doubling that over the next 3 to 4 years. And we manage other people's money in investments such as disability housing, social housing, which is affordable housing. We've done one of the first partnerships with government that have taken place between commercial and Gov, and so that's been great. We do solar, we do land regen work, carbon credits, and all sorts. So again, just fits in with that bringing light to the world purpose. Showing people can bring the best out of themselves through wellness, but also through caring for and looking after those in society and the planet around us. So it fits in really well with our purpose, and then there's a tumble of businesses that sit along those businesses that are kind of relevant that we're invested in, that help us do what we do better.
Nice. Yeah, and do you still with those funds? Are you still looking at other potential investment opportunities?
Look, I think only in the kind of the supplements or the impact space where we can do more of what we're currently doing. And that's just because that's what we've got capacity for. And we have got difficult times ahead. We want to maintain as much liquidity as we can for our big players and make sure they get through these difficult times that we're all facing at the moment.
Yeah. I've got to pick up on that statement a little bit. I mean, what's your, we're halfway through 2023. I mean, what's your view on the market over the next sort of, year or so?
Well, there are many industries that are in recession. Might not be the whole country, but, many industries that are in recession, and we will see the complications and the consequences for that happening. But there's so much opportunity that happens as a result of that. And our fastest growing period through my time at Swisse was through the GFC. Advertising became really cheap because everyone was pulling back on it, and we went harder and doubled down. And as a result of that, it was a megaphone for moving our business forward. So, and consumer demand never dropped off through that period. It was more wholesale, changing the way they bought, money getting more difficult to access. So it's just it kind of the outcomes of what we're about to go through. They can come up in many facets, like we've seen inflation and then supply chain and all these sorts of things. There's always a surprise involved. So being ready for it, but also remain focused on the opportunity. And, a recession, means people are still spending a lot of money. It's just slightly down on the year before as a total. So there's still plenty of opportunity out there.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? It's amazing how much this minute drop in a number can project so much sentiment and change the way people feel and behave. It's kind of an interesting one. But I guess what I'm picking up on what you're saying here is, to steal a phrase from Warren Buffett, is that when everyone's fearful, be greedy, and when everyone's greedy, be fearful. Right? Like be counterintuitive with the market. And I think if people are talking recession and talking things down, well, that can often be a great time to strike and find good opportunities. So, I think that's something that all of our audience as business owners can probably appreciate. So yeah, that's cool. Radek, are you happy? I do have one last question, but before I get to that, are you happy for people to reach out and connect with you if people had questions or?
Yep, got a LinkedIn site, so no issue at all.
Yeah, cool. We'll put that LinkedIn site in the notes, and as we often say on this show, please, if you're reaching out, just put a little note in there. Perhaps say that you've heard Radek on the podcast, so he knows where you're coming from and maybe why you're reaching out. We are all people at the end of these pieces of technology. So, Radek, before we finish up, I just have one last question. I mean, having had the journey you've had, and no doubt many ups and downs, how would you define success for yourself these days?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. For me, I feel like that the biggest moments that I felt greatest satisfaction from in my career is when I've had partners of people come to me that are working with me, come and tell me how much of a changed person they are as a result of working in our organisation. And so for me, that is how I gauge success is your impact on society. I just feel like we're at a really important time. This balance of capitalism and democracy, and the alternate being authoritarian capitalism is kind of, there is a competition on, and if we don't tell the great stories of what our society does, we may quickly lose it. And so I think it's really, really important. If we're in a position of influence, we're a business leader, we provide for the most inspiring, purpose-driven workplace that we possibly can, to do our bit to have people happy and have their partners and families smiling about the space that individual is in as a result of working with great leadership.
Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. No, I couldn't agree more. So, mate, I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your story. I've found it fascinating. I'm sure our listeners will as well. So, yeah, you've been really gracious. So appreciate your time.
Thank you, Simon. It's been great to catch up.
Cheers. And thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buy, Grow, Sell podcast. Please join us again for next week and keep your ears and eyes open. We'll be making some announcements soon about the Buy, Grow, Sell Summit, which will be our big annual online event for business owners who want to learn more about how to acquire, scale, and exit companies. It will be held in September this year. There will be recordings and all the rest, but we'd love to have you come along for that as well. So stay tuned.